Now that everybody has a camera and blah, 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 it's just so all over the place. I would never do it. I would never have somebody come on that's running for fucking president with my intellect. There's certain podcasts out there that if you're a racist, if you're an anti-Semite, if you're a psych nationalist, where you can, and they will laugh at your fucking bad jokes and just give you this pass. And it's like,
at what point did podcasting stop being honest conversation and turn into a full-blown playground for egos and fringe narratives? Because something big just happened. Bill Burr, usually one of the few comics who steers clear of internet drama, finally snapped. And when he did, he didn't just take aim at one person. He aimed at an entire corner of the podcasting world that's been slowly drifting into something way more harmful than it looks. In a recent interview, Burr called out a growing problem. A network of massively popular shows where controversial guests are brought on, questionable beliefs get echoed, and nobody ever challenges a thing. They laugh, nod, move on, and those ideas just get louder. And here's the kicker. He didn't even have to say names because we already know exactly who he meant. Joe Rogan, Andrew Schulz, the Nelk Boys. That whole orbit of podcast personalities who've gone from telling jokes to talking like they're rewriting modern philosophy, while quoting Reddit threads and selling supplements on the side. And Burr? He's had enough. He didn't call it edgy. He didn't call it free thinking. He called it what it really is, a flow of unchecked influence dressed up as curiosity. And if a guy like Bill Burr, someone known for his blunt honesty and refusal to jump into media hysteria, is raising the alarm, maybe it's time the rest of us stopped pretending this is just harmless content.
you just read some smart shit. There's nothing worse than when a dumb person reads, because now they think they're smart.
Bill Burr isn't exactly the guy you expect to lead a cultural call-out. He doesn't chase headlines. He doesn't pop off on social media. If anything, he's built his career on staying above the noise, focusing on stand-up, roasting whoever deserves it, then going back to living his life. But in this recent Variety interview, something changed. Burr finally opened the floodgates, and what came out was raw, unfiltered frustration with where the podcasting world has gone. Not just the content, not just the format, but the people it's elevating and the platforms they're giving to voices that probably shouldn't have a microphone in the first place. Burr didn't sugarcoat it. He described a disturbing trend. Shows that create safe, comfortable environments for individuals spreading polarizing views. Not to challenge them, not to ask tough questions, just to hang out, trade laughs, and casually pass those ideas along to millions of listeners. And Burr made it clear that's a problem. He said outright, there are shows where if someone with deeply divisive views wants a laid-back, no-pushback conversation, they'll get it. And not only that, the host will laugh at their jokes and move on like it's no big deal. He wasn't being dramatic, he was being real, and even though he didn't drop names, anyone who's watched the rise of alternative media over the last few years can connect the dots. He's talking about the major players, the top-ranked shows that treat credibility like it's a costume, something you wear for clicks, then swap out once the cameras are off. What set Burr off wasn't just the content itself, it was the carelessness behind it. The way these conversations are presented like deep, thoughtful discussions, when really they're often just surface-level chats dressed up as groundbreaking ideas. And Burr knows exactly how that ends. When public voices casually host guests with highly controversial takes, without research, without balance, and without accountability, there's real impact. People walk away thinking they heard the truth, when what they really got was entertainment wrapped in an opinion. This wasn't Burr having a bad day, it was him drawing a line. Because if the biggest comedians and podcast hosts don't recognize the influence they're wielding, then someone has to say it, and like it or not, Bill Burr just did.
I'm out of that. So I don't want to hear left and right crap. They're all f***ing nuts. And I have people from construction workers to f***ing, hairy-legged chicks with nose rings going, hey, I like what you're saying out.
Let's be honest. Burr didn't need to drop names. He didn't have to, because within seconds of him describing the type of shows he's talking about, everyone knew exactly who he meant. The smirks, the relaxed bro-ish vibe, the overconfident takes on global politics delivered by guys who got their information from a headline and a YouTube clip. Yeah, that group. It's the podcast personalities who've built entire careers out of being just curious while treating every conversation like they're unlocking the secrets of the universe. The ones who quote philosophers 1 minute and plug their energy drink brands the next. You know the type. Joe Rogan, who presents every conversation like it's an open forum, but rarely pushes back when it counts. Andrew Schulz, who frames comedy like it's journalism, except with punchlines instead of sources. The Nelk Boys, who somehow went from doing pranks in parking lots to interviewing world leaders without a hint of irony. And Burr, he's not impressed. He doesn't see them as rebels or free thinkers. He sees them for what they are: performers. Entertainers who've taken the surface-level curiosity that used to make their shows fun and turned it into a performance of intelligence. He says it plainly: there's a big difference between learning something and understanding it. Just because you can explain a concept you read online doesn't mean you've mastered it, and repeating high-level ideas without context or depth doesn't make you smart, it makes you convincing. And that, to Burr, is the real danger. Because these hosts aren't just having conversations anymore, they're influencing minds, and the bigger the platform, the bigger the responsibility. But instead of recognizing that, Burr sees a growing number of them leaning harder into the same routine: casual talk, no pushback, no fact-checking, no real awareness of what they're doing. It's not about thoughtful discussion. It's about looking smart without taking the time to actually be informed. And that's the part that hits Burr the hardest. He's not saying you can't have a platform. He's not saying you can't speak freely. But if you're building an empire off the back of speculation and surface-level hot takes, you better own what comes with that. Because to Burr, the real issue isn't what they're saying. It's that they don't even realize the impact of what they're saying.
What do you think of all the boycotts, like even the violence?
I don't watch the news. I don't watch the news. I have no idea what's going on. I watch Instagram. I watch lions and hyenas fight each other. This is the things that I do. And I don't think you should be asking a comedian.
Bill Burr didn't stop at calling out who these podcasters are giving a platform to. He went one layer deeper. Because the real issue, in his eyes, isn't just the guests, it's the hosts themselves. More specifically, it's their inflated sense of intelligence. See, it's not enough that these guys are hosting long-form conversations. Somewhere along the line, a lot of them started believing that hosting those conversations makes them experts. That by reading a few high-concept books or quoting a scientist once, they've somehow elevated themselves to the level of thought leader. And Burr wasn't having it. He tore that entire mindset apart with one brutally honest line: there's nothing worse than when a not-so-smart person starts reading, because now they think they're a genius. It's funny, sure, but it's also painfully accurate. What Burr is pointing to is the difference between consuming smart content and actually understanding it. The former makes you sound impressive in a conversation. The latter takes humility, critical thinking, and a willingness to admit when you don't know something. And guess what? Most of these guys are skipping that second part. Instead, they're grabbing big ideas, quantum mechanics, psychology, geopolitics, and repackaging them into casual podcast chatter. Not because they're qualified, but because they know it sounds smart. And sounding smart brings in views. Burr compares it to the kind of guy who would crush trivia night, but completely fall apart in a real debate. The one who memorized a bunch of cool facts, but doesn't know what any of it actually means in the bigger picture. He even turns the mirror on himself. "I'm great in a sports bar, boy," he jokes. "You want to talk about 70s and 80s sports? I'm unstoppable, but sit me across from a presidential candidate and I'm out of my league in 3 minutes." That level of self-awareness is exactly what's missing from the podcast culture he's criticizing. These aren't evil people, they're not malicious, but they're confident in ways that don't match their expertise. And that mismatch has real consequences. Because when millions of people are tuning in thinking they're getting informed, and the person speaking is really just paraphrasing something they skimmed 2 days ago, that's not enlightenment, that's just performance. And Burr's had enough of the performance. In his world, intellect isn't about what you know, it's about knowing what you don't. And when entertainers start forgetting that, their platforms stop being educational and start being misleading.
I trash them both, because that is my job. That is my job. I can't fix the political system. If I start trashing Trump, I would hear the left in the crowd like, yeah. You voted for a guy that is staring off into space.
Here's where Bill Burr turns the dial up. Because it's not just about ego anymore. It's not just about guys pretending to be smarter than they are. This next part, it's about power. More specifically, how podcasting has quietly become one of the easiest ways for powerful people to influence public opinion without anyone noticing. Politicians, billionaires, CEOs, they're no longer just appearing on traditional news networks, they're sliding into podcast studios, casual, unfiltered, and ready to deliver carefully crafted messages in a relaxed, non-threatening setting. And Burr sees straight through it. He says it outright. "Personally, I would never do it. I'd never have someone on my show who's running for office. I know my limits." He admits he wouldn't know what to ask. He'd probably just talk about their favorite Super Bowl, and that's the problem. Because even a laid-back, joke-filled interview can make someone look relatable, likable, even trustworthy. And that's all it takes. People don't need policy breakdowns or hard questions. If they connect with someone during a fun conversation, they'll walk away feeling like they get that person. And maybe vote accordingly. Burr's point is simple. These podcasts aren't offering scrutiny. They're offering image makeovers. And the hosts? Most of them aren't prepared for that responsibility. Or worse is they know exactly what's happening and don't care, because it racks up views and sponsorships. Just look at the Nelk Boys. These were guys known for wild pranks and party clips, then out of nowhere they're interviewing the Prime Minister of Israel. It wasn't thoughtful journalism, it wasn't policy-focused, it was surreal, and Burr uses it as the perfect example of how far this whole thing has spiraled. That interview didn't make political discourse more accessible. It made it less serious, and it blurred the line between influence and entertainment in a way that should concern everyone no matter what side you're on. And Burr isn't pointing fingers from a pedestal. He's saying, oh, hey, I know this isn't my lane, and that's why he stays out of it. Because once you start mixing comedy, fame, and politics without the right tools or integrity to navigate it, you stop being funny and start being a funnel. A funnel for campaign agendas, for billionaire branding, for anything that can be softened and sold in a long-form, low-pressure format. And again, it's not that the hosts are evil, it's that they're playing in a game they don't fully understand, but the people stepping into their studios absolutely do. That's why Burr sounds the alarm, because if we keep letting entertainment platforms become passive political stages, we won't even notice when the line between media and marketing disappears entirely.
He went there to be annoyed so he can then have something to talk about and then he can make money.
If there's one thing Bill Burr made crystal clear in this interview, it's this: he's not on your side. Not the left, not the right. Not the so-called middle that pretends it's above everyone else. He wants nothing to do with political tribes, talking points, or echo chambers. And in Burr's world, that means one thing: everyone gets roasted. It's what makes him different, and what makes his voice so important right now, because as soon as you start criticizing one group, the other group rushes in to claim you. And Burr, he wants no part of that. He explains it plainly. When I talk politics in my act, I trash both sides. That's my job. He's not here to reinforce your beliefs. He's here to challenge them, all of them. And the moment you start clapping for one joke too hard, he's already moving on to rip your side next. He talks about going after Trump in his stand-up, only to hear cheers from progressive audience members. But before they can get too comfortable, he turns the focus on their own party, mocking the lack of real choices, pointing out the age of their candidates, highlighting how the political system has repeatedly ignored the actual preferences of voters. And just like that, nobody's safe, because to Burr, politics isn't about red versus blue. It's about the illusion of choice. It's about billion-dollar systems convincing everyday people that their side is the good one, when in reality both sides are failing the public in different ways. He goes on to say that the real danger is letting people think they're winning just because their party got elected, that somehow their problems are solved, and everything bad is the other side's fault. And that mindset, Burr calls it out relentlessly. He's traveled, he's spoken to people across the country, and no matter where they lean, most of them are just regular folks trying to live their lives. They're not extremists, they're not culture warriors, they're tired, frustrated, exhausted by all the noise. And Burr gets them. He says it outright. There are folks who lean left, folks who lean right, and they're chill. They're just waiting for everyone else to calm down. And maybe that's why Burr hits so hard in this moment. Because while other voices in comedy and podcasting are building brands around being anti-this or pro-that, he's the rare one who still sees both sides as part of the problem. So when he criticizes politicians, it's not a partisan jab, it's a truth bomb. And when he calls out podcast hosts for picking sides, he's reminding them what they used to be before the sponsorships and the platform deals: entertainers. Because once you start catering to one side, even accidentally, your message changes, your audience changes, your freedom changes, and suddenly, instead of calling out the system, you're just reinforcing it, one soft take at a time. By now, Burr had already dismantled the egos, exposed the performance, and torn through the political theater. But in this part of the interview, he took things even further by calling out the people who've tried to pull him into their orbit. Because once you reach a certain level of the influence, you start getting offers. Some subtle, some not. Support this voice. Endorse that idea. Come on this show and talk about what matters. It's not about conversation anymore, it's about alignment. And Burr wants no part of it. He shares one example that says it all. At one point, a well-known political commentator, clearly referencing Ben Shapiro, might sit to bring Burr into his circle, complimented him, agreed with him, held him up as someone with common sense. But the second Burr expressed a view that didn't align with that platform, that same person turned on him, brushed him off as too influenced, too political, and started labeling him in all the usual ways, without ever trying to understand where he was actually coming from. Burr wasn't surprised. He explains the pattern. People in these media bubbles don't really care what you believe. They care whether you can be used as a symbol, a tool for their narrative. And the moment you stop serving that purpose, they move on or tear you down. He calls it out plainly. It's not conversation, it's not dialogue, it's strategy, it's branding. And a lot of it comes from voices who constantly claim to be against the system, while quietly building their own media machines with the exact same tactics. And Burr, he refuses to play that game. He sees it for what it is: influence farming. A way to grow followers, push talking points, and sell outrage under the banner of truth. He even critiques the way terms get thrown around without care. Words like woke, for example, originally rooted in serious social awareness, are now used like catchphrases, recycled, repurposed, emptied of meaning, and tossed around like digital bumper stickers. To Burr, that's the core problem. It's not just bad faith, it's laziness, it's performative, and it turns real complex issues into content. Nothing more. But what really drives it home is how Burr positions himself. He's not angry that people have different views. He's frustrated that so many people in media and podcasting aren't being honest about what they're doing. They're not trying to start conversations, they're trying to control them. And when Burr says that kind of manipulation is harmful to public trust, he means it. Not in a dramatic, headline-grabbing way, but in the slow, corrosive way that builds over time. So no, he probably won't be appearing on certain big-name shows anytime soon. Not because he's afraid to speak, but because he's not interested in being used. And that might be the most honest thing a comedian can do in this media landscape: stay grounded, stay funny, and stay out of the machine. By the time Bill Burr wrapped up this interview, it was clear. He wasn't just venting. He was laying out a standard, a blueprint, for what real honesty looks like in the world of comedy, content, and influence. It's simple, direct, uncompromising, stay neutral, stay grounded, and never stop making fun of everyone. Because once you pick a side, especially in today's polarized landscape, you stop being a comedian, you start becoming something else. A brand, a representative, a megaphone for ideas that may not even be your own. And that's exactly what Burr refuses to become. He doesn't want to be seen as a voice for reason. He doesn't want to be adopted by any movement, and he definitely doesn't want to be the comedian who's only funny to one half of the audience. Instead, Burr does what very few public figures are willing to do anymore. He tells the truth as he sees it, even if it means losing favor, even if it means fewer appearances, fewer friendships, fewer easy wins. Why? Because comedy isn't supposed to be comfortable, it's supposed to be sharp, unpredictable, honest, and maybe most importantly, independent. He reminds us that the job of a comic is to challenge everyone, including themselves, to never cozy up to power, no matter how friendly the invitation, to never let views or subscribers or sponsorships replace integrity, because when podcast hosts start becoming political influencers, when entertainers turn into spokespeople, or when jokes start sounding more like monologues for a side, that's when you lose what comedy was always supposed to be, truth without allegiance. And that's Burr's whole point. He's not trying to save the industry, he's not asking others to follow his lead, he's just showing that it's still possible to speak freely, joke freely, and think freely without becoming someone else's tool in the process. And whether you agree with him or not, you have to admit, it's refreshing. Because in a media ecosystem full of people trying to look smart, sound right, and win debates, sometimes the wisest voice in the room is the one who doesn't pretend to have it all figured out, the one who says, I'm just a comic, and I think this whole thing's gotten a little ridiculous. And maybe, just maybe, that's the reset button everyone needs to hear.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to Stars and Hypes so you don't miss what's coming next. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how things will continue. Drop them in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, take care and have a great day.